Hello everyone, this is James Shore with another test-driven JavaScript video. I'm recording this on March 13th, 2013. What we're working on in this chapter is design, abstraction, and cleanup of the code. And this was inspired by the fact that I was getting lost in the test code, but it's really a good thing to do. Now, in the last episode, we were working on moving our event handling code out of client and into DOM element. And that led to some stuff that just looks like a whole lot of boilerplate. There's not a whole lot of value to this code. And I've been promising all the way along that we were going to get value out of doing this. And so in this episode, what I'd like to do is continue to work on these event handlers and get the client class or the client module to really be solid and clean and see some of the benefits of doing this abstraction. And after we've done that, probably not in this episode, we will continue on with the test side. But I think we're getting close, actually, to getting the client code really cleaned up. Let's take a look at our to-do before we get started. Between recording, Danny Jones reported that WeWikiPaint doesn't work on IE10 when he uses a touchpad, which I think is really interesting and kind of surprising. Well, surprising in a way. I know that IE uses a different approach to touch events than iOS does, or I strongly suspected it. But I wouldn't expect that using the touchpad, I presume he meant like just the mouse pad on a laptop. I didn't expect that to use touch events. So that's something we'll want to look at. I actually wonder, though, if we should add a minimum marketable feature, an MMF, for supporting more browsers. For example, when this got started about a year ago, Android was less huge than it is today. So, and IE10 was not even close to being out. So what if we put those in as something to support in the future? I think doing that will really demonstrate the value or lack of value of doing all these tests. If we've been doing our work right and really emphasizing maintainability, then getting new browser support in there should be pretty easy because that's classic maintenance problem. So that will be interesting to do, but I think not now, obviously, because we're right in the middle of doing this refactoring. But thank you, Danny, for bringing that up, and I think it will be really interesting to try to support those in earnest in the future. Now, let's get back to our DOM element abstraction. Our code is passing our tests. With that in place, now what I'd like to do is I'd like to just take advantage of this abstraction. We've moved all of our event handling into DOM element. We're getting no real value out of it whatsoever. What that means is that we still have an opportunity to do some more abstractions. What I would like to get to is the point where handle drag events is maybe 6 or 7 lines long instead of this crazy amount of event setup. And I think it's totally doable because I think we're doing a lot of stuff here inside of client that is better handled by our DOM element abstraction. I think the easiest way to do this would be to just go through it and start turning these down into one-liners and do that as much as we can. To give an example of that, here on mouse leave, we want to call the endDrag function. That should work exactly the same as it does now. What we're doing here, if you're not familiar with the way JavaScript works here, is we're passing in, rather than defining a function and calling endDrag, now we're just passing in the function endDrag. And since we're not passing in any parameters, that's going to work pretty much exactly the same way. And then the same thing on mouse up here. We can do that. Okay, good. And the same thing here. And here. And even though it's basically the same code, I really like the way it reads. Now it's starting to sort of express more about how the events are handled than all the nitty-gritty of it. The problem is we can't do that when we're calling more than one, when we're running more than one line of code, or when we're calling a function with parameters that are different than what this gives us. And I think that is the opportunity for abstraction. For example, we could say that we want onMouseMove to pass through page X and page Y. But you know what? I think we can do better than that because on mouse move calls continue drag, which is expecting page X, page Y, but it's just turning it into the relative offset. So what if we just pass the relative offset through? That would be kind of cool. Let's go ahead and do that. That would be this code, on mouse move, let's see, we'll need event.pageX and page Y, I think. Yeah. I may be taking this in too big of a step, but I think we can do that. All right. Now on mouse move looks up the relative offset of where the mouse was moved to and passes that through. We're not using that parameter yet, but it still doesn't work. I was expecting that to work. All right, let's back this up. Let's take it a little bit slower. Okay, so far so good. Okay, that code works exactly the same as before. Now let's pass through event.pageX and event.pageY. This will fail because our existing code is expecting just event, but we can go into here and say that we're expecting page X, page Y. Pass that through. Good. And now let's have it expect the offset. And we'll pass the offset through. That's how we calculate the offset. Oh, and I forgot to change this back to this again. Still doesn't work. Okay, I'm going to take a moment to look at this. Oh, of course, I ran into a classic JavaScript problem. This no longer refers to DOM element because we are inside of an anonymous function. So instead, we need to save this off and then use it like that. That should fix the problem. It doesn't though. Where is that failing? All right, back in a moment. Okay, I'm back. You know, I think actually it's working fine now. The issue here is that we changed on mouse move to pass relative offset through to continue drag, but continue drag does not actually take relative offset yet. It takes page X, page Y. But if we get rid of that and just have this use that directly, we're getting closer, but it's failing on Safari for some reason. Probably, well, I was going to say because Safari's using, oh yeah, because Safari's using on-touch move, but now we're passing relative offset through to continue drag, which means that we have to calculate the relative offset here in on-touch move and pass it through like that. Now this may look sloppy here, but the reason I can afford to be so sloppy is because I've got all these tests. And that for me is one of the biggest values of test-driven development, is that it allows me to move faster because I don't have to really think everything through ultra carefully. And by now you've seen that I'm not really the kind of person to think through my code ultra carefully. So this is good for me. Anyway, now we're starting to see some advantages here, because if we go back to on mouse move, now we should be able to just say continue drag. Like that. Yes. And I'd like to do the same thing for start drag. I'd like to have that take the relative offset as well. Now let's take this a little bit more slowly than the last time. Start drag is going to be used here. So let's pass the offset through. And it's also going to be used here. So let's pass that offset through. That should still work. Except that it needs to be event.pagex. Okay. And now we can go do the same code essentially inside of on mouse down. And take it out of here. Except we can't, because we are expecting in the event to be passed through. Well, let's take it, let's just pass it through this way for now. And we'll also need to save off the this parameter. And that should work. It does. All right. This prevent default stuff is a bit ugly, but we're getting there. Now we can do something really similar with onTouch start. Let's have it pass in the relative offset. And that was wrong. This needs to be offset, comma, event. And I'm praying this will work. Not quite. It doesn't work on iOS Safari, probably because we haven't fixed this up to take all the stuff it needs to take. Still not working. Again, I think I went a little bit too fast there. I should have done my refactorings in smaller steps. Let's back it up. All right, that should be exactly the same. Whenever you have trouble refactoring, especially if you're taking big steps, just don't try to debug it. Just back it up, go back and do it in smaller steps, and the solution will generally be obvious. Now, if we pass an offset through here, even if it's a nothing, that should still work. It's already defined. There it is. Okay. Now, getting that offset, rather than having it be undefined, we will set it here. We'll set it to this, and we'll do it like that. We'll need to get the page X and page Y out. And that will require us to get the original event out. And that should still work. Yes. Now let's pass it through. That should still work. Yes. Now we're getting relative offset. We might be able to pass it through here. There. Now it's working. Now we can get rid of this, and it should still work. Excellent. Okay, see, now that's what going slower gets you. I don't know what I did wrong that first time. It may have been obvious to you guys watching, but I do know that just backing up, taking a little bit slower, allowed me to solve the problem without a lot of time-consuming debugging, which is a trick I will use over and over and over again. All right, looking at the time, it is gone quite a bit over time. I'll try to edit it down so we're down to the 15-minute mark. We are going to pick up next time, continuing to work on bringing our duplicated event handling code into DOM element so that ultimately client is really, really simple. I wanted to get to the point where handle drag events basically says, here's what we do with mouse moving, here's what we do with touch. So let's go ahead and update this. We are passing relative X and relative Y. We've done that. Next time, we're going to continue to eliminate event handler duplication in client.js and move it into DOM element. So that's what's coming up next time. Thanks for watching, everybody. I will see you then.